The GEEK Files, 2026, March 3rd, Burnaby. So yeah, Transprovincial Airline, 88 to 92. The Bristol Freighter Hercules engine is pretty cool. 2,000 cc's, 2,000 horsepower, sleeve valve. So normally aircraft engines are like motorcycle engines. There's a piston that's connected to the crankshaft in a crankcase, and then over the top of that you put, we call them the jug, but the cylinder and head assembly with valves in it, external push rods. But the Bristol Freighter was more like a snowmobile engine. Between the piston and the cylinder, there is a steel sleeve with holes cut in it, ports. And depending on whether it's suck or blow, four-cycle engine is suck, squeeze, bang, blow, the exhaust or intake ports on this sleeve are put in position. They're just not holes. They're cut in a specific way to for the timing, because now this is how these ports appear to open between the actual holes in the cylinder, like the intake and exhaust manifold in the cylinder, and the stroke of the piston determines how the cylinder fills. So this sleeve basically sits there and rotates back and forth to open and close the intake and exhaust ports. Which requires a clockwork. Now there's 14 cylinders on a Bristol Freighter. So the clockwork gearing to do this is in the front case, and it's timed to the crankcase, to the crankshaft. So there's just an amazing set of gears, and the system that operates these things to go back and forth is like a windshield wiper. So these gears turn a shaft, which has a little arm on it that goes around. So not only these cylinders turn back and forth, but they go up and back down. So yeah, it's a thing. So, and there's not only piston rings, but you have to seal the sleeve to the cylinder. So there's rings there, so you reduce the amount of blow by into the crankcase. And it is efficient. It is amazingly efficient. As far as I know, this is the only engine where you retard the spark as the RPM increases. Normally, you advance the spark as the RPM increases because it's a timing thing. You want the spark to happen, to ignite the mixture, when the piston is at a certain distance from the top of its stroke. Ignition is a pretty fixed time to happen. So as the RPM increases, this piston is coming up faster, so you have to start the ignition mixture burning sooner, which means you advance the spark. Except for in a Bristol Freighter, you retard the spark. The faster this engine goes, the more efficient it becomes, which also means it generates a lot more heat. So the baffling, normally baffling like on a Pratt Whitney is like, yeah, whatever. But this stuff the engine was heavily baffled. Not only between the cylinders, but around the cylinder heads. There was an inner and outer cowl that created a diverging duct, so it helped, as this thing flew, it helped suck air through the engine and cool the cylinder heads, because the cylinder heads got really hot. And also, very specific ducting around each cylinder to make sure that the cylinder didn't heat up, because if they're aluminum or whatever, duraluminum or whatever the British were using. So you could, if you got a what's known as the soft seize, and this happens in two strokes, when the cylinder, the aluminum heats up and just like grabs on the piston rings. Look, you're grabbing onto a lot of motion on something that's burning really efficiently, and it's really impressive when that happens, because I've actually seen cylinder heads be blown through both inner and outer cowls, like straight through them. These big holes. I mean, these are big jugs. I can't remember what they would be, like at least 5 inches in diameter, maybe more. So like, it's a big hole, and it's impressive. Yeah, but it was, bulk ejections, the first. I better be careful on this one. I think it's the first engine that ever radial engine, big, of that vintage, that had actual bulk port injection, because that you really had to control the mixture in there, because if you ran a lean, it was impressive. Tuned exhaust, all the exhaust was tuned to a particular RPM, and it was like a Harley short pipe. So you wound up with, it sounded like 7 Harley Sportsters with short pipes on them when these things ran. They were noisy, and huge props, because when you're making that much power, not only horsepower but torque, these things torque. Huge 4-bladed prop. It's probably why it was a tail dragger. It was high wing, and the props were impressive. Yeah. So Bristol Freighter Hercules engine, pretty cool thing. It really was. Yeah, so making appropriate decisions. You don't make any money, but boy, you get good stories.